It's fancy.
My costume. And then I'm going to cut these off and put ribbon on them, but these are our bridal bouquets.
Nice.
And okay, so you're going to start off, and actually I do need to turn on music. So you'll start off with music playing. And it's Bach's Minuet in G, and it's I think, so there are a couple of options. You can just play the one straight off the CDs, and I believe it's a harpsichord version, but I just was looking it up as J.S. Bach, Minuet in G, or even Minuet in G, it comes up as the Bach one. So, but you want one that you want to have it be a harpsichord. So you'll put Minuet in G major and put harpsichord. So if the one on your, I find that it's, oops, sorry, I should be more ready for this, but, okay, so it's only a minute, it's only a minute and a half, but it actually goes over and over again, so,
I see.
So you can have this playing when the kids either walking in or sorry.
Hello, Janine.
Okay, so then you'll just be standing there. If you want somebody else, you can have another child. If your child or somebody else in the class can play this, it's not a very hard piece. I have music made up, and it's in the folder. I have tons of things to in this little folder, manila folder. So the music's in there too if you want to try to play it. It's not a very hard piece, but it's ideal if you use a harpsichord so that they can get an idea of what that sounds like, and the keyboard doesn't have that setting. So then you'll just start. So I'm not going to hold this the whole time. Okay, so then you'll ask them, like, okay, so who dresses like Carter? Who dresses like this?
A bride?
A bride, yes. And so, so you go through like what brides wear and what grooms wear, and in our population in the school, not everybody dresses like this as a bride and groom. There's, it's not a pretty small percentage, so you can kind of get ideas of what other brides and grooms wear. And where do people get married? I think because this was in the 80s, the answer was probably in a church, but now they get married everywhere. But they say, oh, would you get married in the school? And they're, oh, okay, no, there are like good places and maybe not great places, not in the middle of the street or whatever. So then you get the idea now with this population that you have different weddings, things happen. A long time ago, weddings were different as well. So we actually start talking about the earliest painter we have is this painter. And so Jan van Eyck painted in the 15th century. So he was born in 1395, they think. Somewhere they don't have records. And then he died in 1441. So he was our very earliest famed painter. And we have, I think Parkmont has a big timeline, but it's literally like 10 feet long. It's this giant timeline. And it'll take up half the class, just like trying to show them where it is, like where on the line it's going to be the very first thing. But because the painter is actually tied really well into the composer, you don't necessarily need the timeline. You can talk about, okay, so 600 years ago, like you can say, okay, what happened like 10 years ago? And you can talk about different events in history. Well, this is like back 600 years ago, generations ago. There was a painter, that Jan van Eyck, that painted, and he, let's see, so then it goes into what was happening at the time. So when he was living, it was right after the plague. So depending on your class population, you may or may not go into much about the plague. If you got a kindergartner, you probably won't. But you can let them know during that time, a lot of people got really, really sick because they didn't understand that like the fleas that were on the rats and stuff, because were really dirty, and they didn't have like toilets, and they didn't have running water, and they didn't have, you know, all of like modern conveniences, and they didn't understand how germs were spread, and so they just didn't know. And so this plague that happened killed, they think, up to a half of the people that lived in Europe. Now, why do you think, it talks about like the timeline, but Carter, why do you think that it didn't happen in America in 1390?
I don't know.
So when did Columbus come?
1492.
Yeah, so in 1492, so America hadn't even been discovered yet. So that's why it was a European thing, and so all these people died in Europe. And so at the time, people were really, after the plague and when Jan van Eyck was starting to paint, they had to get out of this like sad, people had lost so many of their loved ones, some families, some whole villages were demolished with this plague. And so, so they tried to like cheer themselves up, and in the process of that, they tried to do things that were different. And so like music and art and theater, like things that were innovative and new, is actually how the Renaissance came about, how things started changing, and they were doing things that were new and exciting. And so painting became something that a lot of people did. Now, I just went to an exhibit in Portland. It was so great. So if you were from Parkmont, we just covered Andrew Wyeth, and it was Andrew Wyeth exhibit, and I loved it. But if you remember from Andrew Wyeth, he painted in egg tempera on panels, which is really unusual in the 1900s. So he didn't use oil paint. Now, back when Jan van Eyck was painting, that's what they were using in the 1300s, was the egg tempera on panels. And so the reason that Jan van Eyck was so innovative is he's one of the very first, a lot of people credit him with being the first oil painter, but he was the one that really made oil painting what it is today. He started the process. So it wasn't, he used oil paint. Let me pause that. I totally forgot to have another. Basically, it compares watercolor, tempera, and oil paint. And they said to put tempera and just put something shiny over it. I didn't. I used oil paint, but after a week and a half, it was still completely wet. And I put linseed oil, it didn't work. So I put clear fingernail polish on top, and it worked. Like I was touching it, and that's from earlier. So it doesn't, so the kids can actually go in and kind of see that it's different. On one side, it has more texture, but they can see that this is a matte finish. This is totally, a water wash, and then the oil paint has like a real shine to it. And putting the fingernail polish over didn't actually change the look of it. It was still really shiny and luminescent. So I have one of these for both of the schools because we didn't have this one at Parkmont. So the kids can see the difference between oil paint and what they usually use. You never use oil paint at school. So Jan van Eyck was really innovative. And then the painting's gonna look weird to the kids. Is this what you pictured, Carter, that a bride and groom would look like?
No.
No, this was in the early 1400s. And so the painting itself is kind of groundbreaking because up until that point, actually when I was in the Wyeth exhibit, I went into another room and they had all these 14th century paintings, and all of them were more like this. And this is another Jan van Eyck. So they're all religious. The Ghent altarpiece was done by he and his brother. They're all really religious, and they're mostly Madonna and Child, and this was the first painting that became famous that wasn't like that, and it was really early. But there are a lot of really interesting things about the painting. So it was done in oil, and it looks like the first thing they're going to notice is, and you can ask them, tell me about the woman. What is unusual? And they'll get to the point that she looks pregnant, right? But then you have to show them she's actually holding the fabric up in front to make the fabric of her dress look like she's pregnant. So then, if you've talked about the plague, then you'd say, it takes a little while, but why do you think she would want to look pregnant? And so the reason they point out is that to be pregnant and new life was such a big deal after the plague and so many people dying, that even as a new bride, she wanted to look like she could have kids and that this was a big deal. So it is an unusual painting, but you have to go in and show. It's actually, the fabric's going down like that, and she's like pulled up this big drapey fabric. What time of year do you think the painting was painted? Winter, yes. So you can see that the light is different. So then, and I don't have the Cassatt painting because it's still in both the wagons, but if you pull out the Cassatt painting that's done in the summer, it has warm tones in it. So you can see that it's warmer, and the light from here is not a warm light. So that depending on your kids, you may or may want to point that out. And then they're of course wearing this like heavy velvet and stuff, and so their clothes are really heavy and stuff. But then they have a lot of symbolism. So once again, if you're teaching little kids, you won't probably go into the symbolism, but the older kids might really get into it. The symbolism, like when you see a big yellow M, Carter, what's the symbol of a big yellow M?
Big yellow M.
Oh.
When you're driving down the freeway and you see a giant M.
McDonald's.
Oh yeah.
The golden
McDonald's.
arches. Yeah, McDonald's. So if anyone that were to see that, they know. Or a Nike swoosh, you know it's Nike, right? So the symbolism in this is actually, everybody kind of knew the symbolism back then. And so like this chandelier, there's only one candle in it, and that symbolized the eye of God looking down on the people, this marriage. It's really interesting. If you look back on the back wall, there's a mirror back there, and you cannot barely see it in the picture. But the mirror actually is the back. It's a convex mirror. It's the back of them, and then it shows two people in front, and it may or may not be, one of them may or may not be a priest, because they think that one of them was Jan van Eyck, but the other one she knows all this. What about it may or may not be a priest because they didn't use priests back then in that time period for weddings. So the only real religious, like overt religious symbolism or aspects are the little medallions that go around the convex mirror are actually religious symbols. And then
I can't remember what the dog meant.
Oh, it means conjugal fidelity, which the kids aren't going to get the conjugal part, but like faithfulness. Yeah. And that's why Fido is actually the name of dogs, because it's faithfulness. Fido had to do with that because they're faithful. The shoes right here had to do with standing on holy ground, because both of their shoes are in the picture, which I thought was interesting. He actually signs it, Jan van Eyck was here. It's right over the convex mirror, and they never sang their paintings back there, so that was kind of arrogant of him, I thought. But the texture is really, the fruit in the windowsill is to symbolize that their marriage would be fruitful. So there's a lot of that. That's all in the book, but you can go into as much or as little as you want of the symbolism. But the heavy drapery, what they want to point out is the texture. That this lesson really is about texture. And so they like to talk about the dog and point out the dog. And I, of course, jumped like 10 things ahead. I'm sure that and the guy, this is Arnolfini, Giovanni Arnolfini. The name of it is Arnolfini and Bray. I can't remember, but it's a famous Italian a merchant, and he was wealthy enough that this is like his wedding portrait. It was a big deal to have Jan van Eyck paint your wedding portrait. And so do you think that the bride is really beautiful? And they may or may not think that she's beautiful. And so I have the forms of beauty. I think I have 2 of them at Parkmont. So I'm going to borrow one of them for Niles. And it shows Queen Elizabeth with her head shaved all the way back. It has Botticelli, kind of a more rounded spring. She's covered up, but so you have like rounded figures and the shaved head and that kind of thing, so that you can see what was beautiful. There was long hair versus short hair. There are a few different things that are in that visual. So I'll bring that visual. And so which one did she look most like? She actually has her head shaved back, and so you can see that she was in that form of beauty is one of the things. Let's see, and that's all symbolism. And so when you get into the texture of it, you'll have the kids, you can actually look around with the little kids when you're talking about texture. Usually what I do, like she's perfect. So can you come up here for a second?
It's okay.
Okay, so I'll grab one of the kids out, and so her jacket is perfect for texture. His hat actually is perfect for texture. So you can pull somebody out, and then you can show them the texture of like a hard shoe, and have them feel their shoe, even the bottom of their shoe, but that's pretty dirty. But you can have them feel something hard, like their desk, and then see like something soft, something, and then, you know, their jeans aren't necessarily super soft, but maybe they are, like have them kind of consider it. And then I have these, this has to do with the dog. So you're gonna compare the dog in the Cassatt painting to the dog in this painting. So the Cassatt painting is a lot more, the kids, it's blurry, it's wobbly, you know, they were saying in the last lesson. It is definitely more wobbly than the other one. And so you don't see each fine hair. So you will show them these. I have these for both. I had to make the ones for Niles. So it starts with the line drawing. And so this is just straight lines. And then you add in the light and shadow. And there isn't any color. So I may actually add some color into this one and the other one. But the other one's not colored, I don't think, from baby part ones are. So if I just add a wash of brown over it, then you see that the light and shadow, and then maybe the color I'll add in, and then texture. So that covers all four of the art elements. And so you'll see that, and then you can have them compare the dog, like you can see every single hair. So I'll probably blow up the dog to the size of that so the kids can actually see the hair. And then you can see the dog's really big in the Cassatt painting, and they'll see, no, it actually is really, it's more impressionistic, and we could introduce them to impression. So then the texture thing, let me see. And then you can go into as much as you want on him, but there is a lot to cover. There isn't a ton. He was from Belgium. I got really hung up on the fact that they said he was Flemish, but he was from the Netherlands, and the Netherlands is Holland, right? Like it's not Belgium, but I guess I didn't realize that it was until 1830 that Belgium and the Netherlands were separated. And like if you were from Holland and you said you spoke Flemish, that would be bad. Like, so anyway. That doesn't matter. The kids will not care one bit about that. So anyway, he was from Belgium. But he was considered a Flemish painter. He actually was in Holland for a lot of time. And it talks about the Duke they ended up working for, and they became very, very close friends. And even after he died, the Duke gave his wife a lot of money. He traveled to Spain as like an envoy for him. He actually did a lot of like work that wasn't related to painting. Okay, and so then the next thing we'll talk about, so there's layering and there's texture, and so the next thing we talk about is the composer. So if you want to stop.